There's been a good deal of encouraging thinking lately about Roxbury Latin and our approaches to any number of things, including the ways in which we acknowledge diversity within our community. One of those diversities has to do with spirituality and faith traditions. I believe that each of us, regardless of our age, gender, race, or place of origin, is forever questing to answer fundamental questions about our existence. For some people, philosophers, theologians, clergy, wrestling with existential questions animates and occupies their lives. Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where will I go? What is life's purpose? Who am I? What do I believe? What do I stand for? As a school, we dare to affirm that the pursuit of answers to these questions is not just an important factor in our scholarly, emotional, and social training, but the most important thing. For many people, a reckoning with issues of faith and identity determines the trajectory of their lives. Our proposition is that there is plenty to learn about these topics. As with politics, I believe, unfortunately, we often simply reflect the positions of our parents. My fondest hope is that with politics, as with faith, each of us will determine his or her own path based on legitimate scholarship and soul searching. To say what one really believes requires earnest engagement and a lifelong search. Part of our commitment to this pursuit is a tradition that regularly features members of our community talking about their faith commitments. Usually these talks line up with significant dates on a particular religion's liturgical calendar. In the first month of school, we recognize the Jewish High Holy Days, which always fall during this time frame. The two major holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, frame the period in which we currently find ourselves, Yamim Noraim, or the days of awe. And as we often are, we are privileged to hear today from two students, Daniel Burke in class 1 and Heshi Leibowitz in class 2. I invited these two boys because I know something of their personal commitments to Judaism, their knowledge of that religion, and their capacity to share important facts about their religion and their own dedication to it. I hope that you'll listen somewhat differently this year. In a year in which less is certain, it would seem to be especially appropriate that we attempt to answer anew some of the big questions of our existence and our purpose. I hope what Daniel and Heshi have to say will perhaps blessedly disrupt what your own thoughts are and lead you to some deeper understandings, or at the least inspire you to pursue them. Please join with me in welcoming Heshi and Daniel to our virtual podium.
Good morning. This past Friday evening, Jewish people around the world celebrated the arrival of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah means head of the year in Hebrew. 10 days after Rosh Hashanah comes Yom Kippur, which means Day of Atonement, which begins this coming Sunday evening. Together, these two holidays make up the Yamim Noraim, which means days of awe, and are often referred to as the high holidays. We began Rosh Hashanah in our family, as did so many Jewish families, with a special dinner. Since the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, the holiday begins the evening before the full day celebration. At dinner, we had a round version of the usual braided bread, or challah bread, that we eat every Sabbath and holiday meal. The round shape signifies the beginning of a new year. It also signifies the crown of a king, since Rosh Hashanah is traditionally understood as the day that God created the universe and became king of the universe. We also ate apples dipped in honey to express our hope from God, since Rosh Hashanah is also understood as the day of judgment, the day that God passes judgment on his creations. During the day, we gathered outside of our synagogue, wearing masks and standing 6 feet apart, to recite special prayers that are specific to the high holiday liturgy. Most importantly, we heard blasts of the shofar. The shofar is a ram's horn that was used by Jews in biblical times to call the people together and to draw their attention to special announcements. This is what it looks like, and this is what it sounds like. Oops. Sorry about that. In the afternoon, we gathered with members of our congregation by the Charles River, wearing masks and standing 6 feet apart, of course, to fulfill the ritual of tashlich, which means casting off in Hebrew. We threw pieces of bread into the running water as a symbol of casting off our sins. We do this because Rosh Hashanah represents the day of divine judgment. It also represents the beginning of the 10-day period in which we are given the chance to repent for our sins, a period that ends at the close of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This year, I decided to dig a little bit deeper into the meaning of Rosh Hashanah by looking at the specific references to it in the foundational sacred text of the Jewish people, which is the Torah, or Bible. It turns out that a deeper understanding of Rosh Hashanah requires more work than I'd expected. All the other Jewish holidays are described in detail in the Torah, including Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, Passover, which is the celebration of the Exodus from Egypt, and Shavuot, which is the commemoration of the giving of the Torah. But for Rosh Hashanah, we don't get much. We don't get descriptions of the new year, we don't hear about the creation of the universe, and there is no reference to the Day of Judgment. Here are the few things that we do learn. In Leviticus 23, and then again in Numbers 29, God tells Moses to tell the children of Israel that the day is one of complete rest, since no work can be done at one's occupations on that day. We learn that it is a day of sacred gathering, and that it is a day when the shofar is sounded. Most curiously, the day is described as taking place on the first day of the month in the 7th month. When I saw this, I thought to myself, the Jewish people is a funny people to put its new year in the 7th month. I needed to understand what was going on here. I started by seeking out what counts as the actual first month of the year in the Torah. I found in Exodus 12 that the first month of the year is when God is about to take the children of Israel out of slavery from Egypt. At that moment, God says to Moses and Moses' brother Aaron, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months." So Passover, which commemorates the Exodus from Egypt, gets to be the first month in the Torah. Now this made sense to me. After all, the Exodus from Egypt is the beginning of the Jewish people thinking of itself as a distinct people. So, why is Rosh Hashanah, which we have celebrated for millennia as the head of the year, assigned to the 7th month? Well, the answer to this 7th month New Year problem is that Rosh Hashanah represents the head of the agricultural calendar. In the land of Israel, the agricultural calendar is aligned with the beginning of the rainy season, which begins in the fall. And so, Rosh Hashanah takes place in the fall. I will explain in a moment how all of this is connected to the spiritual and behavioral demands of the Rosh Hashanah holiday. But first, let me give credit where credit is due. In my explorations about Rosh Hashanah, I relied on Sefaria.org, an amazing online resource for the study of Jewish sacred texts. Sefaria includes full-text translations of the whole Talmud, which is a compilation of rabbinic commentaries from the 1st through the 4th centuries. Through the rabbinic commentaries, I learned to see how the Torah pegs Passover as a spring holiday, and how it pegs Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as fall holidays. Passover is assigned to the spring at the moment of the Exodus from Egypt, when Moses says to the children of Israel, "You go free on this day in the month of Aviv." The word Aviv literally means when the ears of barley ripen. So we know that Exodus happens in the spring because that's when the ears of barley ripen. In contrast, in Exodus 34:22, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are defined as happening at the same time of the harvesting from the fields, which happens in the fall. More specifically, the Torah describes the time of harvesting as the turn of the year. The turn of the year means the beginning of a new year. So, once I shifted my understanding of the Rosh Hashanah New Year concept as one having to do with the farming rhythms of the land, rather than the political history of the people, then this separate New Year began to make sense too. The Torah actually describes the difference between farming in Egypt and farming in the land of Israel. Unlike Egypt, where farmers had access to the Nile River to collect water for their crops, farmers in the land of Israel would need to rely on water from the rains of heaven, as Moses explains to the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 11:11. Moses explains further that the rain is dependent on God's judgment of the children of Israel's behavior. If they do as God commands, God will grant them rain. If they don't do well, then, as Moses warns, there will be no rain and the ground will not yield its produce. Now it was clear to me. I could see how the day of sacred gathering and of shofar blasts that is described in the Torah had evolved in Jewish practice into the Rosh Hashanah holiday that we have come to observe as our new year. The sound of the shofar is a call to introspection and self-evaluation. It's a reminder that this is the time of year that God determines whether or not the rainy season will bring the rain necessary for the people to flourish. I would summarize the special meaning of the Jewish New Year holiday as a celebration of the annual requirement to perform a self-check. Rosh Hashanah reminds us to evaluate how well we're doing in walking the ways of God. This year, my deeper understanding of the agricultural underpinnings of the holiday allows me to see the connection between this personal self-check and the success of the people as a whole. The Torah draws a direct link between self-evaluation in the face of God and the group success that results when God chooses to bless the land with rain. For me, this means that the prosperity of the communities I belong to depends on the personal and spiritual growth that we are called upon to undertake at this time. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, for the opportunity to share in Hall today what I learned about Rosh Hashanah. And thank you also for giving me, through this process, the opportunity to welcome the Aral community into a central component of the Jewish religious experience, to explore, argue, and engage in the always winding and surprising path through Judaism's ancient and sacred textual sources for the sake of practical, moral guidance. Thank you.
Good morning. For 5 years, I've been in the audience of this hall, listening to distinguished adults who have dedicated their lives to Judaism in some form or another speak on the high holidays. So I'm honored that what I have to say can be considered alongside their wisdom. I'm going to share some thoughts on Yom Kippur, which is considered the most holy day in the Jewish tradition. Yom Kippur happens 9 days after Rosh Hashanah and marks the end of the 10-day period considered the high holy days. Yom Kippur is a unique holiday within the Jewish tradition. Most holidays, both in Judaism and other religions, are commemorative festivals. Take, for example, the Jewish holiday of Passover, commemorating the Exodus from Egypt, or Christmas, a celebration of the birth of Christ, or Diwali, a festival of lights which honors several Hindu deities. Yom Kippur, in contrast, does not commemorate any specific historical event. Rather, Yom Kippur is a deeply personal holiday, which focuses on the worshippers themselves. Yom Kippur means the Day of Atonement in Hebrew. It is a time when Jews confess to and apologize for their transgressions. For me, it represents an ethical reset, a time to rid oneself of moral baggage and prepare for the upcoming year with a clean slate. One of the most salient emotions I feel during these days of introspection, the Yamim Noraim, as we've often heard them called by Mr. Brennan, is Norah, Hebrew for awe. There are aspects of the high holy days that, to me, give them a sense of elevation, of intense importance. At the beginning of the high holy days, the mood is festive because Rosh Hashanah commemorates a new year and a new beginning. The special importance of the holiday is on exhibit in various ways. For example, there's a choir that sings the liturgy rather than the usual solo cantor. The clergy all wear ornate white gowns rather than the usual jacket and tie. And sometimes celebrities even make an appearance. At my synagogue, we all look forward to when Bob Kraft, who happens to be a member, makes his way to the lectern to chant in Hebrew a passage of the annual reading. Yom Kippur brings its own unique, elevated mood to the community. On Yom Kippur, the size of the congregation in attendance doubles or sometimes even triples in size. people are literally bursting through the doors, with seating set out outside of the sanctuary. The interpersonal interaction on Yom Kippur is also drastically different. It may just be the fact that everyone is hungry from a day of fasting, but there is a reserved, solemn manner about the congregation. Some of my oldest friends are from synagogue, and when I usually see them, it's a joyful reunion, punctuated by animated gestures and loud talking. But on Yom Kippur, a simple, terse nod suffices as we walk into the sanctuary with our families. Each year, there's a tacit gravity to the day, understood and observed by all. The high holy days are reflective and personal times for everyone, so I'd like to share a reflective and personal story that I think ties in well with Yom Kippur. Over the summer, I wrestled with a challenging existential question, which I think may be relevant to all of you. This question is applicable to any religion, so I encourage you all to give it some thought. Every religion I can think of advertises its own set of morals and guidelines for how to be most holy or righteous. For Jews, this is manifested in the 10 Commandments and 603 other guidelines in the Hebrew Bible. There are some commandments that I have followed, like honor your parents, love the stranger, and even do not consult with wizards, unless you, of course, count Mr. Poyman in chemistry class. But there are several laws, such as wearing a head covering at all times, only eating animals that have been ritually slaughtered, and not working on Saturday, that I don't follow. Now, here's the important part. If all of these commandments came straight from God, a perfect, divine entity, and I don't follow all of them, how can I be a good Jew? What makes me a Jew if I don't follow the commandments laid out exactly for the Jews? Does the fact that quite frequently I do my homework on Saturdays, in doing so working on the Sabbath, disqualify me from Judaism, one of the most central parts of my identity? I struggled with this philosophical question for quite some time until I landed at the answer: Yom Kippur itself. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement for Jews, when we recognize the mistakes we've made, promises we've broken, and transgressions we've committed. It is not a celebration, but rather a day of confession and growth. There is a prayer that is recited each year on Yom Kippur, and which gave me clarity and perspective on this matter. It is called the Vidui, and it is a collective confession of a wide range of transgressions. I will recite it now in English. The tradition is to beat one's heart as each sin is said. Note also how it is in alphabetical prayer. We abuse, we betray, we are cruel. We destroy, we embitter, we falsify. We gossip, we hate, we insult. We jeer, we kill, we lie. We mock, we neglect, we oppress. We pervert, we quarrel, we rebel. We steal, we transgress, we are unkind. We are violent, we are wicked, we are xenophobic. We yield to evil. We are zealots for bad causes. This confession is all-encompassing. It literally covers the A to Z of how we as a people have sinned. I was always puzzled as to why there are so many things mentioned in this confession that I hadn't personally committed. For instance, I haven't oppressed or killed anyone, but each year I confess to it. This aspect of the Vidui is what catalyzed my epiphany. While of course the confession can be taken literally, there is another more personal meaning. For me, the confession represents all the ways that I myself have not been a perfect person. It accounts for the fact that I have not been able to follow all of the commandments, and it serves as a statement of my humanity. By taking part in such a broad confession, I'm atoning for not only these specific transgressions, but also for my failure to follow all the various Jewish commandments that I previously mentioned. Yom Kippur, while a solemn day, is also a day of forgiveness. That same God who wrote the commandments I have not followed is also said to forgive all confessions. It is with this assurance that if I recognize my shortcomings as a human being, I can be forgiven and I can continue to call myself a Jew. This realization has helped me be confident in who I am and how I choose to express my Judaism. While my apology to God during Yom Kippur has helped me reconcile my personal shortcomings as a Jew, there is, of course, a more important lesson in the Vidui confession. Those enumerated sins were against other people as well as God. Apologizing to God is one thing, but in order for true absolution, I think it is even more important to apologize to those people who were wronged. Self-reconciliation only goes so far. You've only truly atoned when you've sought forgiveness from another human soul. So, as Yom Kippur approaches, may you all make your own personal confessions and find it within yourself to make things right. Thank you.
Thank you, Heshi and Daniel. We are not only better informed, but inspired by what you have to say. I see no questions listed here, but I wonder if you could say a little something about how your commitment to Judaism informs your daily lives.
Well, I could take that one first. So it's a custom in Judaism to pray 3 times a day in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And while another thing I haven't followed in the commandments, I don't do that every day, but I do think it's I have spent many years observing that custom while I don't do it today, and I think that it is a great daily routine to wake up and immediately the first thing you do, thank God for being alive, for being able to experience the upcoming day. And I think it's just a great outlook on life, and to be thankful for every day that you're on this earth. And I also when you go to bed, you say one last prayer, the most important prayer, which essentially establishes God's oneness. It's called the Shema. And I just think it's so beautiful that you start the day with a thank you and you end the day with a thank you. And to always just remember, that you have your place, on this earth, and how you shouldn't take any moment for granted.
I agree. I think that was very well said. I think that it's nice. It's a very good point that Daniel brought up, that the starting prayers and the ending prayers are very significant, and also all the stuff in between is important too, because as Daniel talked about, the commandments that we are supposed to keep in the backs of our heads at all times. There are some that are very practical for everyday life, such as ways of treating people, and how you're supposed to think about life, and how what you do affects your whole community and everyone around you.
Do you think in that regard, as I imagine those excellent responses, that there is much about your religion that lines up with the values of our school, or what our mission is?
Yes, I believe so. What comes to mind first is although I haven't been in it for a while, in the refectory at the back, there's a big inscription that says, "To those whom much has been given, much should be expected." And I guess that can sort of be interpreted in a way as, if you're part of a community that, you have the potential to really make better and improve, then you should. And doing so not only results in, self-improvement, but it's for the better of the community and the world as a whole.
I also love how Heshi mentioned in his previous answer the fact that these commandments are always ongoing in the back of our heads as we move through our day. And I think that's truer of it's more visible in the Orthodox Jewish community, where they devote their entire lives to learning and studying, and they're, all day they are in these establishments called yeshivas, which is essentially a place for studying. And I think it also manifests itself in the conservative tradition, I think, of which both Heshi and I are a part. Um, and basically that we should always be, considering how to improve ourselves, to improve the people around us, in our general community. And I think that's certainly seen in the mantra of RL, and how we should always be, contemplating how we can improve others' lives and improve our greater community.
From what I can see, we have one question so far, and it comes from Mr. Bettendorf. And it goes as follows. My mother always joked that the commandment to honor one's father and mother is the only one with a threat attached, that thy days may be long upon the land. As I grew older, I was concerned about the precise meaning of honor in this commandment, because as Mr. Brennan said in the opening remarks, we are obliged to think for ourselves and not blindly follow our parents' beliefs. May I ask what you have been taught about what it means to honor one's parents? He probably means by extension your teachers too, but go ahead.
Well, what I've been taught is different, obviously, from what it says in all of the religious sources. As Mr. Bettendorf mentioned, it is, I'm pretty sure, one of the only commandments that has a threat. In the Torah, it has instances that say, if you don't honor your parents, then you shall be stoned. But, obviously that's not a very modern interpretation. So I think that honor your parents means not necessarily do everything that they say, but their honor, or, honor them as you would someone who you greatly respect, an important figure in the world, and revere them as if the punishments were real, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted it similarly, and I took that death threat at the end as kind of just a statement of how important and how paramount that particular commandment is. And I think that it is certainly more than okay to disagree with your parents, but I always approached it as disagree with them, but do so in as honorable a manner as possible. And I think that's true of anyone you interact with, that you should never be disrespectful to them, even if your opinion differs. And in that regard, certainly you should be independent, but also do so in a polite way, and preserve the way you honor them, even if your opinions don't match up.
Thank you. The final question would be looping back to what I said about at the beginning, which is to say each of us is questing for a greater understanding of life and our presence on this planet. And if you were to recommend some ways in which someone who was questing could find out more about Judaism, for example, and in effect determine if that is the faith tradition for him or her, what would you recommend?
Well, I think, Judaism is a religion that does not proselytize, so it's pretty, it's a process, certainly, to become a part of the Jewish community. But I think the best way to to learn about it is to talk to Jewish people. I think we're all more than willing to talk about our own experiences, and one of the beautiful things about it is that everyone. Every Jewish person experiences their faith in a different way and to a different degree, and adopts it in a way that is meaningful for them. And so I think to engage people like me and Heshi, in a conversation about how, what's important to us, and how we have used our faith as a way to grow and a way to learn, I think that's the best way to do it. I think we're all more than willing to share with you our own experiences.
I very much agree with what Daniel said, especially the part where he said that, you know, it's meaningful for people that, you know, want to understand more about the Jewish community, that there are so many different types of Judaism. Everyone interprets their faith in a different way, albeit some are similar. But I agree that the best way, I'd say, to learn about the Jewish community and become a part of it is to immerse yourself in experience, so that you yourself can form your own personal identity as being a Jew.
Thanks very much for that, and thanks for your excellent presentations this morning. I want to remind everybody that we should never take for granted our freedom of religion and the very opportunity that these boys are expressing this morning, in their willingness and ability, in fact, to honor their religion is something that's not true all around the world. There are places in which oppressed people are not able to express themselves or to pursue their truth through a religion, and we shouldn't ever take this for granted. You might remember the presentation last spring, actually, by Daniel's great uncle, Stephen Burke, in which he talked about the increasing rate of anti-Semitism around the world, the way in which the Jewish people in particular are being threatened in certain communities again. And we always need to stand up for that which is right in this regard, and especially for the Jewish people as they seek to pursue their truths. I wish those of you who are celebrating Yom Kippur, obviously, a meaningful holiday this weekend. And for all of us, I hope this will be a restorative long weekend. Tomorrow is a holiday. As you know, there's no school at all. And I just wanted to remind people, perhaps some of you don't even know this, but that we're going to have 2 remote-only dates coming up to add a little variety to our routine. Those dates will be on next Thursday, October 1st, and the following Friday, October 9th. That way, 2 cohorts that get to experience this alternative. Thursday, October 1st, and Friday, October 9th. And then, of course, that's followed by a holiday on Monday, October 12th. I also want to remind you of something that you know is near and dear to my heart, and that is the beginning of the debate, the presidential debate season. We will not all be together before next Tuesday, September 29th, and that will be the first of 3 presidential debates. We'll be talking a bit, as we always do, quadrennially, about this presidential election, the debates and campaigns leading up to it. And we'll be devoting Founders Day this year to an exploration of the election. But for now, in order to prepare for that, but also just to be informed citizens, I recommend to you on Tuesday night watching that debate, which begins at 8 o'clock. Thanks very much. Have a good day.